Hey everybody, welcome back into another video. Today we're just going to do something fun. We're going to take a piece of Phil Wood's vocabulary and we're going to flip it into a bunch of different things. I've been doing kind of a lot of heavy stuff on the channel lately where I'm trying to teach these big concepts like diminished and all that. Today let's just do an activity that I think all of us should be doing in the practice room, something that I regularly do. That is just taking something from one of my heroes and flipping it into something I can learn from. So we always hear that rhythm is the most important thing in our playing, and I think that that's absolutely true. But then the question becomes, how do we take the rhythm and make it front and center and work on what we're doing? So the way we're going to deal with this piece of vocabulary is, I think, an awesome way to make rhythm front and center and take one rhythm and come up with a bunch of different vocabulary based off of it. So today I've chosen to take just a little excerpt from a solo of Phil Wood's on There Will Never Be Another You off of one of my favorite albums, You're Driving Me Crazy. Highly recommend you all go out and check out this album. Just fantastic playing. I love the way the rhythm section sounds on this guitar, so it's got that really driving chunk. And I think that particularly makes this line kind of interesting. It makes you play in a different way when you're playing with different instruments. And I think that the way Phil Wood swings on this album is just so great. So why not choose it to highlight rhythm? Now, what you're going to notice is that, yeah, I'm playing tenor saxophone. He was playing alto saxophone. So it's in a completely different key than you would play There Will Never Be Another You in. But when it comes to learning vocabulary, I don't know. To me, it doesn't really matter because what I'm not trying to do is take this piece of vocabulary and stick it one for one into my solos over There Will Never Be Another You. So actually, sometimes I'll just do things in a completely different key to make sure that my mindset is not in, hey, let me take this and plug it into my solo. So just wanted to mention that because you'll be like, wait, this is from There Will Never Be Another You, but it's in a totally different key. Yeah, so if you have perfect pitch, this may bother you. All right, so a couple notes before we dive in. All right, so what are we going to be doing? Well, basically, we're going to be taking this original line. Here it is. Whew. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take the rhythm. I thought the rhythm was particularly interesting here because it has a couple of repeated rhythms, but then it kind of builds on that. So all we want to do is we want to remove the rhythmic scheme from that. So the rhythm is just one da do ba do da da do ba do da da do ba do ba de ba do da ba do la da. Da do ba do da da do ba do da da do ba do ba de ba do da ba do la da. And what a cool rhythm. You know, sometimes whether the rhythm is something that you want to use, just sing it with no pitches. And if it still sounds cool to you, that's a great rhythm to write some other vocabulary off of. I think this sounds amazing. Da do ba do da da do ba do da da do ba do ba do da ba do ba da. Amazing rhythm. It's kind of catchy even without the pitches involved. Okay, so the goal here is going to be to write a couple of pieces of our own vocabulary, meaning we're going to choose the notes, but we're going to keep his rhythm. Couple of notes before we dive into what I came up with to sort of maybe prompt your imagination to do the same thing. One thing is that rhythm and phrasing, I think, is really tied to the tempo. So what do I mean by that? We play very different rhythmic ideas and we structure our phrases in very different ways depending on the tempo that we are playing at. So what I advise you to do is if you're going to do work like this where you're taking the rhythm and you're writing your own notes to it, you want to keep the original tempo in mind. This is a pretty quick, it's like somewhere north of 200, maybe like 208 or something like that. So when you're writing your own vocabulary, you want to write it thinking about that same tempo. And a lot of times it will work if you do it at a different tempo, but sometimes it loses its effect largely if you change the tempo. So that's my first recommendation when you're doing this work. Keep it at the tempo that you originally found it. The second thing is, what we're going to do is we're going to write a couple of pieces of vocabulary over the exact chord changes that we found this over in the solo. And I think that's a really great way to start. Just take the chord progression, take the rhythm, and start writing your own lines over it. But something that you could do if you really liked this kind of work is you could take a completely different chord progression and you could try this 4-bar rhythm over that. See what happens. It's just an added layer of flexibility, an added layer of experimentation. But I suggest that you basically just start by writing different notes to the same rhythm over the same chord progression and see what you can come up with. Okay, so I've prepared 3 variations. Now, these are just 3 of 100 that I could come up with. I just wanted to kind of show you that this works. So we're going to keep the rhythm exactly, and I'm going to write some different notes to the rhythm. All right, let's take a listen to the first one that I came up with. All right, nothing too crazy here. Do you notice that the first couple of measures, the first 3 measures of this line, it's the exact same rhythm? So I chose to play off of that by, for the first 2 bars, playing these same notes because it's the same rhythm. But then in the 3rd bar, you notice when the chord changes, I change the notes that I'm playing to fit that new chord. You will also notice at the end of the 2nd bar, I'm anticipating the next chord on the and of 4. And that's something, as I was writing these lines, I realized sounds really good to anticipate. You don't have to do that every time, but here I really, really like the sound of anticipating the next chord on the and of 4. That's a really cool trick that you can use because the and of 4 is so close to 1 that your brain kind of perceives it as the downbeat of the next bar, even though technically it's still in the previous measure. That's something I really like to do in my vocabulary, and all my heroes do on a regular basis. Okay, let's check out the next one that I came up with. So you can hear in this one, I'm playing with directionality. I'm playing with where I'm using sort of vertical sounds like arpeggiation, as opposed to more horizontal sounds, which is, playing in a stepwise scale kind of pattern. And again, I'm using a little bit of anticipation. Look at what happens in that 2nd bar on the and of 4, and you will see that I'm already thinking about that next chord. So you can hear, like, for the first 2, it's 2 completely different lines with completely different melodic ideas, but exactly the same rhythm. And I think they both work really well. All right, one more for today. So you can hear in that 3rd one, I did play off the fact that it's the same rhythm 3 times again by using a phrase that largely uses the same notes. But again, look at how the stuff that I'm playing in the first 2 measures is different than what I'm playing in the 3rd measure. Notice that the first note in the first 3 measures stays exactly the same, but then in the 3rd bar, I'm changing a little bit of what comes after that first note. That's kind of what I was thinking and hearing when I wrote this. The other thing that I'm doing at the end of this one, I'm using that triplet, that 8th note triplet, to try to play something that has a lot of tension and release. I'm using flat 9, sharp 9, and then releasing that to the 5. And I think that that makes this 3rd line a little bit more adventurous. And so I love doing this kind of vocabulary work because instead of taking a piece of vocabulary verbatim from somebody and like learning it in all 12 keys, which is obviously fantastic. I've done so much of that in my life, and that teaches you so much. Learn to play what the masters played exactly. But this is a totally different way because, if I were to write maybe a dozen of my own pieces of vocabulary to this rhythm, I'd be walking around all week with that rhythm stuck in my head. Ba boo ba doo dot da doo ba doo dot da doo ba doo da ba doo dot ba doo ba dot. And do you know how good that would be for me to walk around with that rhythm just like replaying over and over and over and over again? That is how you develop your rhythmic concept. You need to be like hearing these indicative rhythms that our heroes play so much that they just become a part of you. And you're going through life like singing and tapping rhythms and all this kind of stuff. You just become a more rhythmic being. And then when you're playing, that innate rhythmic way of living life just it comes out your instrument a little bit more without you thinking about it. So I encourage you to take this exact rhythm and write your own vocabulary using the rhythm. See what happens. If you've never done this before, there's a little bit of a learning curve, right? You've got to get used to, okay, I'm taking the rhythm, I'm writing my own notes. There's a lot of trial and error involved too. Every line you write is not going to be totally amazing, and you're going to have to throw away a bunch of stuff or restart or, geez, I like that first measure I wrote. Now what do I do? But you see this kind of work where you're really diving deep and you're figuring out what works, what sounds good, what doesn't. It really results in a lot of growth. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you're going to do this exercise. Highly encourage everybody to do this with maybe this line or with another line that you find from one of your favorite musicians. Thanks to Phil Woods for the inspiration, as always. The older I get, the more inspiration I find in these recordings of the masters. It's really just a treasure trove of things to work on. Now, if you dig this kind of stuff and you want to work more closely with me, consider joining us in our online group / private lesson program called the Jazz Intensive. This is myself and Chris Claxton's studio, basically. And you get a monthly private lesson and you get a bunch of group coaching calls every single week, along with our library of materials that we've created in terms of courses and things to practice. And it's just a really great place to be if you are looking to get to that next level of playing. There's a link below that'll explain a little bit more about what that's all about. And if it's something that you're interested in, you can click the link, fill out a quick application. We'll hop on a call together and we'll see if you're the right fit. Until next time, hope you're all doing well. Keep practicing, stay inspired, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.